More from Martha's report online on the Sky News website. Right now time to talk to the government. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the Business and Trade Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. A very good morning to you, Secretary. Good to see you.
Good morning.
I want to get to the Indian trade deal in a moment, but first, just to get your take on the protests that we've seen over the last few days in Epping. Do you think there's a chance they'll spread? Is the government concerned that that might happen?
Well, I think what we are seeing is people protesting their unhappiness at an asylum system that we aren't happy with either, that we inherited, that we're seeking to change. I understand those frustrations. I mean, if you think about the number of these hotels, which were a function of previous government not processing these claims properly, not having a grip on the system, I think there were over 400 at the height of that. There's now just over 200, so it is coming down. The number of asylum claims are being processed much more quickly. More people are being deported under this government who shouldn't be in the UK. But I understand those frustrations. But I think what people want to see is that system sorted out, and that is exactly what the Home Secretary, the Home Office and the government are doing.
Yes, I get that, but it's not really directly responding to the question. Are you worried that the protests themselves might spiral in a way that obviously they did last summer?
Well, look, all the government, all the key agencies, the police, they prepare for all situations, so I wouldn't want you to be sort of talking this up or speculating in a way which is unhelpful. Of course, the state prepares for all situations, but I think what we've got to talk about is, why are people unhappy with, say, the asylum system? Are they reasonable? Are they upset for legitimate reasons? Yes, we share those as a government. That is why we are sorting it out, and I understand the frustrations people have, but ultimately you solve those frustrations and solve a problem by fixing and getting a grip of the core issue, which is what we're doing.
Do you think you're doing it fast enough with, for example, small boat numbers at a record high for this point in the year?
Yes, I think if you look at any reasonable reading of what has happened since the election, that reduction in asylum hotels from the peak at what it was, if you look at the number of people deported, if you look at the number of asylum claims being processed in a proper way, so we get people who shouldn't be in the UK out of the UK and then integrate people who do have a legitimate need to be in the UK, all of that is there. I wouldn't for a second, though, say there isn't more to do. Everyone in government would accept that, but we are finally getting a grip of this system in a way which, frankly, we didn't have for many years before the election.
Just finally on this, the police have said that they did walk counter-protesters to the protests, and then they did drive some counter-protesters away from the protest because of a potentially violent clash developing. Is the government OK with that level of police involvement?
Look, I've got to say I'm not aware of that, and operational decisions are for the police. I don't think it's helpful to speculate or comment on that as someone who hasn't been part of that decision making. I think the police in the main do an excellent job in really difficult circumstances when you've got two sides of British public opinion rightfully protesting in a way which is legitimate. I'd leave it to the police to handle that situation.
Let's talk about the trade deal, Mr. Reynolds. Are you delighted today to see it all over the line?
Yeah, it's a historic day. It's a really important deal. It's the biggest deal the UK has done since Brexit. It's the best deal India's ever done with any country in the world. And it's a good deal because it means more money in people's pockets, higher wages, higher exports. So it works for every part of the UK. It is incredibly significant in terms of the future because India is the fastest growing big economy in the world. And of course, for the specifics of that, I mean, if you think about India being the biggest whiskey market in the world, we produce the best whiskey in the world. That tariff goes from 150% to 40% over time. On electric vehicles, 110% to 10%. On machinery, aerospace. But of course, for our world-class services industry as well, access to Indian government procurement in a way that no other country in the world has. So look, any trade secretary of any major nation would be on their media today delighted that they've done this deal. I'm delighted that we've done it for the UK and done it at a time where we're also improving trade with Europe, with the US and a host of other countries as well.
I mean, one of the other things, and we talked about this earlier in the programme, it's impressive that it's been struck while also striking deals with the likes of the EU and the US. Obviously, President Trump is over this weekend. Are there more details still to come in terms of the deal with the US?
Look, we are in negotiation with the US, in direct contact every day, to be honest. We are pleased that we've got a better set of arrangements on those sectoral tariffs than any other country in the world, but I'm not satisfied. There's more to do. We've got to resolve the steel and aluminium issue and also get final agreement on the reciprocal tariff. So that's the 10%, as people might know it in shorthand form. There's more to do to finish that. We've got other trade negotiations going on with the rest of the world. I mean, my message is very simple. It is a time of unprecedented pressure on global trade because of that very assertive US agenda. We are managing that, and we're going to manage that in the UK better than any other country in the world. It's not just about the terms of trade that we have, but the confidence we can give people. The UK is the right place to do business from, no matter where your customers are at. And that's why I think we've seen such big uptakes in business confidence, in people saying the UK is a good place to invest, coming top of some of those surveys the professional services firms do. Always more to do, but yes, it's really important, and we'll continue those negotiations with the US, which obviously by country is our single biggest trading partner.
You didn't list pharmaceuticals there, and I just wondered how disappointed you were that not so much the news from a few weeks ago that AstraZeneca is going to move its listing to the US, but they just announced this past week a big investment in the US to manufacture drugs there, build a new plant there. Disappointed that we didn't get that business?
Yeah, I'm always after as much business for the UK as we can. I mean, on the listing, that issue isn't resolved yet, so just want to put that note of caution forward. But of course, yes, there's big gains for pharmaceuticals in this agreement with India today on intellectual property, as well as the tariff on some products. So it is always a part of our negotiations. We reflect British strengths as part of that. But we've also got a set of priorities domestically for life sciences, which are around reducing the regulatory process for clinical trials, about attracting more investment in innovative new drugs. We need to do more. It's an area where we've got real British strengths, but we do need to do more. That's why we've got an agenda around that, but it's always something that's a focus for government, and we'll do even more in future.
I just wanted to finish coming back to the Indian trade deal, Minister, because this is a topic that you and I, when you announced the deal, spent almost an entire interview on, and I wasn't going to return to it. Except something jumped out to me in what your department sent out today. This is the topic about whether or not if Indian workers come over to the UK temporarily, albeit for up to 3 years, that they won't have to pay national insurance contributions. 8%, of course, for employees, 15% for employers for regular UK workers. In your announcement today, it was in the annex, going into detail on this issue. You write that the DCC, the Double Contributions Convention, will not make it cheaper to hire Indian workers over British workers. I don't understand how that is the case, based on the fact that an Indian worker coming over for 3 years won't pay the 8% employee contribution, and their employer won't pay the 15% contribution.
OK, so it's very straightforward. There is no incentive, there's no undercutting of any British worker in this deal. If you were to hire an Indian worker, you'd have to pay the same taxes as you would for a British worker. You'd obviously pay higher charges through things like the NHS surcharge, visa charges, if you did that. For Indian nationals who are temporarily posted to the UK from an Indian company, or for British workers temporarily posted to India, you pay into your own country's social security systems rather than the host country for up to 3 years. So for India, actually their employee contributions are higher than ours. They're at 12%. Their employers are 12.5%, so slightly less. So you are not in a position where if you were to hire an Indian worker, you would pay a lower level of tax. That is categorically wrong. Anyone saying that has got that wrong, or they don't understand it, or are being mendacious in putting that forward. You pay into your own country systems if you're in one of these small numbers of workers who are temporarily posted from an existing employment relationship. And what India is getting here, we already have with 50 other countries in the world. So they're getting something which is comparable to an EU national who'd be in that position, or a Japanese or a Canadian national. But anyone saying British workers have been undercut from this deal is completely wrong.
But with great respect, Minister, I mean, you can say it might be similar to other deals around the world, and you can say that it might be reciprocal for temporary workers going in each direction. But a temporary worker sent over for 3 years by an Indian company will pay less tax than a current British worker for any British company or Indian company fully based in the UK.
No, they would pay into the Indian system, which is a comparable cost in percentage terms to ours. They'd actually pay more as an employee because their rate is higher. But it would be categorically false to say they're not paying tax. They're paying it in India. They're getting their entitlements in India. They're not accruing any benefits to the UK. But they are paying a comparable rate because the Indian system is comparable to ours.
They'll be based in the UK, and down the street, in the same kind of industry, in the same city, will be a different employee that is paying a tax in the UK that they are not paying into the UK system.
Yes, because they're not getting an entitlement from the UK system. They're paying it into the Indian system at a higher rate if they're an employee than if they were a UK national paying into the UK system. So they're just paying into the Indian system, and that's where their entitlement is accrued. If they stay over 3 years, then of course they would have to pay into the UK system, as we have with many other countries in the world. Some countries actually have more than 3 years with that relationship. But they're not paying less, they're just paying it into the Indian system, which is where their benefits, their entitlements to social security would accrue. And the same is true for a UK national in India. They wouldn't pay into the Indian system, they'd pay into our own system in the UK, and again that's where their state pension entitlement and other benefits would be accrued.
It's really interesting perspective, Minister, and we thank you for bringing that clarification is one way to put it. That framing of it, I guess, is another way of putting it. But either way, congratulations on getting it all done today, and enjoy the signing ceremonies. Do you get a nice
Thank you.
A nice Indian gift as part of it? Obviously fully declared and all the like.
When you meet your counterparts, you do sometimes exchange gifts, and I exchange often something with a constituency link from myself, from Stalybridge and Hyde, to my counterparts. But yes, they all have to be declared on both sides. But it is a great and historic day for the UK. Good for business, good for consumers, good for the exchequer and the revenue that will accrue, and good to be a country navigating these tensions on global trade better than anybody else.
Johnny Reynolds, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.